Hey there, lesson 2.1, slope. Our objective, students, you guys are going to be able to find the slope of a line by looking at a graph. And you also be able to find the slope of a line when you're given 2 points and the slope formula. Let's begin. What is slope? Let's define it. Some words you may have seen: the steepness of a line, the, how do you say, incline or decline. Sometimes you hear pitch when you're talking about like a roof. Slope can also be measured as rise over run. That's a lowercase Greek letter delta, which means change. So the change in my y direction, which if you remember, y is right here. It's the y-axis. It's your up and down movement. And it's divided by, so there's change in y, divided by change in x, which is my left and right movement, my axis. I'm going to get rid of those colors here real quick. Okay. So if we look at this graph, pretend I'm walking along. We read a graph from left to right, just like we read a sentence in English or Spanish, or I think Italian is also. There's a lot of languages read left to right. And so as I walk along, I'm going higher and higher and higher. My altitude my altitude is increasing, so my slope is positive. Okay, and these dots right here, these are 2 points on this graph. The graph is actually this blue line. The coordinate plane is what the blue line is on. Okay, so the coordinates for this are 0, 0. I'm going to free up some space here. And the coordinates here are 2, 1. So if I start here, I go up 1 square, so my rise is my change in y is 1. My run is how much I change in that 1 to get to the next spot on the line. And I'm right there. And I moved over 2 spots. So my run, my change in x is 2. So this means my slope is positive 1/2. So let's look at the same graph again. And if we're going to say the change in y over change in x is my slope, how do we find the change in y? Well, the change in y is actually the difference. So it's the y coordinates, the difference between those, and the x coordinates, the difference between my x coordinates. X coordinate tells me where I am left to right from the origin, and my y coordinate tells me where I'm going up or down. Okay? So in this case, my first point right here is 0, 0. And my second point is 2, 1. So I have x1, y1, x2, y2. This is the first y coordinate. Okay, or excuse me, x coordinate. And this is my second x coordinate. This is my first y coordinate, and this is my second y coordinate. So in order to find the change, I take y1, which is 0, and I subtract from it y2, which is 1. And then I take x1, which is 0, and I subtract from that to find the difference, x2, which is 2, which gives me negative 1/2 over negative 2. When I have a negative divided by another negative, that gives me a positive. These guys cancel out, the negatives. And my slope is 1/2. Slope is denoted as the letter M, lowercase cursive m. Think of it as like M for mountain. Sample problem number 1. I hope you've been writing all this stuff down. Let's start here. Let's not use points. Let's just look at the graph. I go down 1, down 2. So down direction is negative 2. That's my rise. My run is going to be over 1, over 2, positive 2. Negative 2 divided by positive 2 is negative 1. That's my slope. And you see, as we read left to right, the arrow is going down, 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 which means my slope is negative. And that makes sense because I got a negative number there. This is a tricky one. So we're looking at a graph. Let's do rise over run. So this point here is, I go from 0, 0. I go over 2. So my first point is 2. And down I'm at -1. My second point is over 3. And down 1, -1. Okay? So if I start at this point and I count how much I go up or down, I'm not going up at all or down. And I go over 1. What's 0 divided by 1? Well, that's 0. And that makes sense. If we use our 2 points, x1, y1, x2, y2, and I plug them into our slope formula, y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2, I'm going to get -1 minus -1 over 2 minus 3 equals -1 plus 1 over -1, which is, oh, sorry, I'm running out of space here. -1 plus 1 over 1 equals 0 over, -1, which is just 0. Remember, 0 is neither positive nor negative. Here we have a graph, but we don't have points labeled, so I'm going to find a spot on the graph where the line definitely goes through the grid marks. So first thing I'm going to look at and ask myself, is this slope positive or negative? Well, as I move from left to right, is it going up or down? Well, it looks like if I was climbing this mountain of a slope, my elevation is increasing, so my slope is positive. Okay? I'm going to start at this dot, and in order to get to I started this red dot here. In order to get to this red dot here, I'm going to count. So I go first up 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I'm looking at rise over run, my rise is 4. And I go over to the right, 1, 2, 3, positive 3. Remember, up is positive, to the right is positive, down is negative, to the left is negative. So my slope is 4/3. I can't simplify that anymore, so I'm done. Now we don't have a graph. Now our slope formula becomes very important. So I have y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2. So let's label it x1, y1, x2, y2. So I'm just going to take these guys here and just plug them into this formula. That's all we're doing. So y1 is 7, check. Minus y2 is -4. Please use the parentheses, because otherwise you'll think you already wrote the negative, and then you just write, you'll just do this. You'll go, oh, 7 minus 4. That is not the same as 7 minus -4, and you'll see why in a second, okay? So I'm just going to shift everything over here. And then I have x1, which is -4, minus x2, which is -6. 7 minus -4 is the same as 7 plus 4. -4 minus a -6 is the same as -4 plus 6, which gives me 11 over 2. And that is the slope of the line that goes through these 2 points. Last example. If you have questions, make sure you write down the questions or circle any sample problems or anything I've done that you don't quite recognize. So our slope formula, m equals y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2. So first thing I like to do is label the coordinates in each of my points. It actually doesn't matter which one is point 1, right? This is point 1 and this is point 2. What matters is I put the y's on the top and the x's on the bottom. So let's actually start with this one, -15 minus 0 over -11 minus 3. It's going to give me -15 over -14, which is the same as 15 over 14 because a negative divided by negative is positive. So you see I switched. I used y1 over x1. This time I did y2 over x2. Let's try it the other way. Let's do 0 minus -15 over 3 minus -11. That's going to be positive 15 over positive 14. That checks out. Oops, sorry, I meant to say slope. There you go. That's the slope of the line that passes through these 2 points, okay? All right, quick recap. Slope is rise over run of the graph of the line, which is the change in y divided by the change in x. And we find that change by subtracting the y coordinates from each other and dividing that by the difference in the x-coordinates, subtracting the x-coordinates. We found out how to do it by counting on a graph, right? So I have my coordinates here, my graph, my line. I have from these 2 points, I have a rise. This is my change in y. And then I have my run. This is my change in x. So my slope becomes change in y over change in x. Actually, let me write that change in x in green. Okay, and then also we have it if I get 2 points. Here's my first point. That's why there's those little ones below the x and y coordinate. And my second point, we plug these values into our slope formula to find the slope. Your practice is going to be lesson 2.1. There's a worksheet for this. And there's also a Desmos activity in the Canvas class. So I'll do the Desmos. All right, if you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me.